On today's Locked On Senators, how many of the Sens' 5 free agents will be back next year?
And I had boots on the ground for the Belleville Senators' historic first ever playoff win, so we'll get into that game.
And more on today's edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. It's your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm Jake Sanderson, and you're listening to Locked On Senators podcast.
I'm Tim Stützle, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
Welcome inside episode 1032 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan on the outskirts of enemy territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains, today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit it, I have a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. You can also find Locked On Senators wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on YouTube. Today is Thursday, April 25th, and Pilsy, how was the drive, man? 7 hours round trip, he goes, just to see this historic moment, the Belleville Sens' first playoff victory in franchise history.
Ross, honestly, it was well worth it. I was obviously hoping for a big Belleville game, but I wasn't expecting the absolute clinic they ran on the Toronto Marlies. And that's not even me just being a homer and a Belleville Sens fan, but the Marlies couldn't get anything going. Belleville played such a tight game defensively. They threw everything they had at Hildeby, and they end up getting the 3-1 win. And the good people of Bay of Quinte finally are treated to their first ever playoff win for the Belleville Sens. So it was incredible to be a part of that moment.
We put up a quick postcast style video on our YouTube, left that as a YouTube exclusive. So if you missed it, go check it out on our YouTube page. Pilsy was in the arena just reminiscing of how David Bell outcoached John Gruden and the Toronto Marlies. And I mean, you don't have to look much further than the stat sheet and shots on goal in particular. After 2 periods, it was 28-12 on the shot clock favoring Belleville. Even though it was tied after the first period, 1-1, still 13-4 in favor of Belleville, and that's not counting the 2 posts that Belleville hit. One from Angus Crookshank would have been a nice way to end the period up after giving up the first goal on the first shot, but Mad settled in, and no fault of his own on the goal either, just a deflection off a defender, off a point shot from Marshall Refi, I'll call him. But after that, Zach Ostapchuk, first goal of the game, gets an assist as well. So it was the prospects that came through. And with a veteran-heavy team that Belleville iced last night, that was nice to see that the top prospects like Ostapchuk and Tyler Clevin led the way.
Yeah, definitely. I would say those were the Sens' 2 best players. I mentioned on our little post-game clip that Stephen Halliday had a really good showing, in my opinion, even though he didn't get a lot of ice time. And Matt Sogard didn't have to do a lot. Most of, even Ross, the Marlies' limited amount of shots, those are inflated. A lot of those shots were just perimeter shots because they couldn't get anything going, or just let's chuck it at the net and hope something good happens. And Mads was sharp. He was not letting a lot of rebounds through. Good glove. And the Marlies didn't get anything going, really. So this was a game where if Belleville is able to continue on with this kind of recipe of success of playing a good forecheck, playing well defensively, and getting pucks on net, I think they're going to have a lot of success on Friday up against the Marlies in Toronto.
They can win the series in that game. It's only a best-of-3 play-in series. Then it will be a best-of-5. Whoever wins between the Marlies and Sens get to take on the Cleveland Monsters. That Belleville Sens lineup is a monster right now. They posted it before the game. Pretty much exactly what we expected and talked about on Tuesday's Locked On Sens. But man, every single line has depth and talent. And I think that with all the call-ups we saw all season, guys playing different roles, it's all prepared them for this moment where their fourth line has Imama, Cole Reinhardt, second most games played in franchise history behind Sacco. They just have so many different ways they can beat you. Bon Giovanni hit another post. That guy's on fire right now. So I'm gearing up for a long playoff run, Pillsy. I was a little nervous after it was 1-1. Like, oh, did Belleville take their best shot at Toronto and they're going to fight back now and get the win? No, this was an absolute clinic put on defensively and taking advantage of a good goalie at the other end, but still being able to put enough volume on Dennis Hildeby that they were able to get the victory.
And Hildeby didn't even make that many 10 bell saves. Like, it wasn't like he was keeping his team in the game. Like, Belleville was just creating pressure. The puck possession was well done in all three zones of the ice. And Ross, I'll even say, I think maybe it might have even been a blessing in disguise that Belleville gets scored on first, right? So you're trying to settle into the game. It's only a couple minutes in, and boom, you allow a point shot that gets kind of double deflected to beat you. And you're like, okay, how are we gonna battle from this? And what did we hear from Igor, from David Foote? A lot of this Belleville Senators season story is fighting through adversity. So you're down 1-0 on a bad play that's not really anyone's fault, just bad puck luck. How are you going to bounce back from this? How are you going to prove that you're not going to let this get you down and have the Toronto Marlies go up 2-0? Well, they tie it up and they have good pressure and they play well the rest of the game. So I'm feeling good about this, Ross. And I've got your number 9, Angus Crookshank, in red jersey that I picked up for you. I'm not even worried about mailing it as soon as possible because you don't need it that quickly, Ross. There's going to be a couple more rounds that you can wear that jersey.
I'm surprised your red Igor Sokolov jersey isn't hanging back in that case right now.
I meant to do that actually. And funny enough, I've got it right here. So there's really
show the jersey off for the good people. That's a beautiful red.
The red, I'm glad I went with the red. It's sharp. It looks good in the building. You got the Igor Sokolov 13. You got the CAA patch.
Big CAA guy.
Definitely nice jerseys. And yeah, good call, Ross. I meant to, and the Belleville Senators shoulder patch there, classic. I meant to hang it up. I will do that for the rest of the playoffs here, definitely.
Yeah, that's good call. So we'll have more game day preview coming up tomorrow on the Belleville Sens in Toronto. We know some Sens fans are boots on the ground.
Yep.
Love to see that. Send in the photos at Sens Central on Twitter. Heart of enemy territory. And my goodness, it's great to see that even though the Sens season, I know I keep saying it was an unmitigated disaster, that we're still able to get some sort of playoff juice flowing, because watching these NHL games, it's so much fun. Every puck battle, every race is all out all the time. And we needed to see that in this fan base. So it's not in Ottawa, not with the big team just yet, but it's great to see Belleville not only play their first playoff game in a long time, in 2 years, and lost both the others, but to come out with the win, just enormous, and hopefully a sign of things to come going forward for Belleville. Okay, on the other side, the topic du jour for the Ottawa Senators, they have 5 free agents, 4 RFAs, and 1 unrestricted free agent. Pillsy, doesn't that feel a little low?
It feels very low. And that's why this offseason is going to be so interesting, Ross. And obviously we'll get into it in the next couple of months here. But if you're Steve Staios, you probably would have liked to have a couple more contracts expiring, so you have a little bit more flexibility. Or do you keep these guys? Are you going to let them go? Is it going to free up cap space to make other moves? But this team, Pierre Dorion, kind of his whole mission was, I want everybody locked up so we're not going through trade deadlines where we're trading away fan favorites. We're going to lock everybody up for as long as possible. That can be good and that can be bad. So we're going to see how Steve Staios manages it here, starting with the free agents at hand.
And of note, Cap Friendly is projecting the Ottawa Senators salary cap space going into this summer at $12.16 million. So keep that in mind, $12.16 million to spread out between the 5 players potentially that we're going to bring up in the next segment, but also to improve this team.
Before we throw to a break and keep going, do you know if that cap friendly salary cap space includes the increase that's projected, or?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. Because
it has the salary cap at $87.7 million for next season.
Nice. All right, here we go.
Here we go. 5 free agents, who to keep, who to let go. That's next. And we forgot to do a spin of the Tankathon yesterday. So double spin at the end of today's show. That's all coming up next. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. You guys know the classic game Monopoly, and why not make it more fun with Monopoly Go? We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime, the scoreboard's not looking good, you're feeling low, not sure if your team or you can pull out the win. That's when you got to dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, with tons of twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. Charge other players rent for your iconic properties and more. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play.
Today's episode is also brought to you by the GLEBE Central Pub. The GLEBE Central Pub, right in the heart of the Glebe, is your neighborhood pub when you want to have a great time with friends, with family, or all by yourself. Go in. There's always a great vibe at the GLEBE Central Pub. They've got live music. They've got open mic night every Wednesday. Don't forget about Chicken Wing Monday, wing night, 75 cents for just each wing. See how many you can get into you. It's always delicious. It's always at the Glebe Central Pub. You can also follow them on their social media, Glebe Central Pub. They've always got what's coming up at the Glebe Central Pub from their beers of the day. Also, they are open until 2 a.m. every single day. So you want to catch a game, catch some live music, or brush up on your trivia skills, go check them out. There's always something happening at the GCP, where the vibes are free at the GCP. It's nestled in the heart of the Glebe. It's your neighborhood pub. Go check them out, 779 Bank Street, and let them know the fellas at Locked On Senators sent you. 779 Bank Street, LOSP sent you to the Glebe Central Pub. Pilsy. So what a night it was in the hockey world. The Belleville Sens get a win. PWHL Ottawa clinches a playoff spot. Congratulations to those ladies. Gonna make us proud here. Go for the championship. So we got 2 playoff teams
Look at
in
us.
the Ottawa area. Look at us. Who would have thought? Not me. But all that, and the Toronto Maple Leafs lost on home ice in front of their fans. Aw.
Tough night for Toronto hockey fans. The Leafs lose, the Marlies lose. You hate to see it.
Yeah, don't we ever? In the third segment, we'll discuss the NHL playoffs as they keep impressing every single night. I'm so entertained by what I'm seeing every game. I hadn't even watched much of the Edmonton series. I tuned into that game. It's back and forth all night. So we'll discuss that in the third segment. But today's topic for the Ottawa Senators is the free agent group with one crown jewel, and that one isn't even making above league minimum. It's Shane Pinto. Obviously, I think that's where we need to start here, because out of all the players that are free agents for the Ottawa Senators, nobody is going to command more term and more dollars than Shane Pinto.
Yeah, Ross, certainly this is a underwhelming list compared to our previous offseason free agent trackers for the Sens. So really the only one of like major consequence here is Shane Pinto.
He's due for a raise. Is that raise going to be covered enough by $4.5 million that could be off the books with the 2 other guys who are actually making coin? Do you think that that's a reasonable thing, like a reasonable $4.5 million contract?
If Shane Pinto is going to get $4.5 million?
Yes.
I would say That's probably on the higher end. Is that too high? No, I won't say that, but I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere between 3 and 4.5 million. Obviously,
on your bridge deal.
yeah, exactly. Obviously, the length of the contract is going to play a big part in the AAV, but I stand with it. I'm building bridges, not burning them down. I still want Shane Pinto on a bridge deal. I believe that's best for the team and best for Shane Pinto, honestly. So we'll see how this goes. Steve Stais has a lot going on right now. Apparently, he's overseas. Apparently, the head coaching discussions are heating up. So Shane Pinto, we talked about it as being one of our 5 priorities for him. That's something that he's going to have to figure out pretty soon here, because I think you don't want that hanging over your head. You want to clean that up so you can move on to the next thing.
He almost got a career high in points this year, playing only half the games. He had 27 in 41 games, had 35 and 82 last season. So the trajectory to me is still a two-way centerman who can put up 50 points and help you defensively as well. So I think there's a ton of value in locking a guy like that up at his age, but I get where you're coming from, that they've got a lot of guys locked up. We've got full episodes available if you want to go back. Nothing's really changed when it comes to what we believe Shane Pinto's value is or what kind of contracts he should sign, but he is due for a raise from $775K. We can all agree on that. We know the circumstances around that contract. Meanwhile, let's just get it out of the way, okay? Let's get it out of the way. Dominik Kubalik is $2.5 million in cap space.
Send him to the moon. One-way ticket to the moon or back to Detroit. I'm not sure which one's a worse sentence. Just like, honestly, Ross, and we'll probably do this in an episode later, so we won't get too into this, but if you're looking, we did our Ottawa Senators MVP yesterday. Go check that episode out. I think everyone's going to be shocked who the MVP is. But the Ottawa Senators LVP, least valuable player, or most disappointing player, I would be hard pressed to find someone in a leaderboard of that higher than Kubalik. Like Kubalik, it cannot be understated how much of a disappointment this was. Like we talked about, obviously when you're looking at a trade for the first time, when he comes over in the DeBrincat trade, you're thinking, okay, this guy's a 20 goal scorer. Like we can pencil him for 20 goals, maybe even more if he's set up in the right spot. He's going to be ripping the puck. Well, sure, he gets like 11 goals, but when he wasn't scoring goals, he was absolutely useless. And he was supposed to be a guy that added scoring to the bottom 6. Didn't happen. He got jumped by a lot of guys. Pretty much he was just playing in most of these games, Ross, out of necessity and because he had a cap hit. So to Kubalik, we've already wasted too much airtime discussing him as a Sens free agent, because there is a less than 0 chance he comes back. Even if he came back on a league minimum, I wouldn't sign it.
No, me neither. I mean, 11 goals, 4 assists. And what really just rubbed me the wrong way was how he, no matter what he didn't do at 5-on-5, he still averaged almost 2 minutes a game on the power play. It made absolutely no sense. So
it was nuts.
$2.5 million in cap and a roster spot for somebody else to put in some
more meaningful work. Yeah.
Doesn't
even have to be more goals, Ross. Just more of anything. Like he was a complete zero out there that ended up getting power play time. He even played in the top 6 for a handful of games. Like he was elevated in the lineup when other guys were deserving of chances. It's so incredibly disappointing how bad this season went for Dominik Kubalik.
Safe to say he's not going to be back. Now, sticking to forward, I think one of the better stories this year was how Parker Kelly was trusted in a defensive role, in a penalty killing role. He's making $762K. He signed that contract under Pierre Dorion that this year was a one-way contract for him. He played a good portion of the season. He set career highs as maybe, they weren't enormous anyways. It was 12 previous. He gets 18 points this year. Would you bring back Parker Kelly?
I think I would, Ross. I think he's one of those guys that he's put the work in. 2-time winner of the Jonathan Petra Hardest Worker at Dev Camp. Undrafted guy that's really found his way. I find that, he's He's a guy that plays with a bit of an edge, but also can put the puck in the net. And Jacques Martin was a really big fan of his. And I think that if you can get him under $1 million, this is a guy that adds value to your fourth line. I thought of all the fourth line players, he was the most consistent one. I don't know how you feel, Ross, but he's a guy that brings physicality. He was second on the team in hits, only behind Brady Katchouk with 171 all season. He's getting block shots too with 67 in the top 10 for the Ottawa Senators too. He's killing penalties. So Parker Kelly, I think, is a serviceable fourth line player.
Yeah, I think we just have to watch out how many fourth liners we want to add, which leads us to the next guy. But no, I think Parker Kelly's done a lot. When he's at his best, he's getting under guys' skin. I'd like to see him do that more consistently next year, but certainly developing into a solid two-way forward, a guy who you can rely on, and obviously beloved in the room. Nobody has anything but great things to say about Parker Kelly. So I'd be happy to see him back on a 1-2 year contract that around the same as what he made here. I think as long as
maybe a bit of a raise, I would give him a bit of a bump.
Let's go to 800.
At least, yeah.
Boris Katchouk, this is where, look, decent showing, waiver pickup on deadline day. Thanks for coming out, but we just can't have, unless it's a two-way contract, which I doubt he would take. I'm assuming he's going to be looking for a one-way. It was nice knowing you, Boris. Appreciate the goal in Winnipeg, boots on the ground, but it's been a blast. Good luck in your future.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Ross. I think he's a nice player, and I don't want this to be kind of a, poking fun at Boris Katchouk. That's not what this is meant to be. I think he's a solid player with decent potential. I just think you can only have so many guys like that around, and the Katchouk thing is getting out of hand here. So that might be another thing we got to move on.
Why am I not invited back to your team? Well, our captain in your name. It's just a bit annoying.
Yeah, and Brady Katchouk, Boris Katchouk,
Yeah. Oh my God, what a reason not to bring him back. But no, you just don't want to crowd the fourth line. Look, if he wants a two-way contract, be a Belleville guy that can come up a la Matthew Highmore, Rourke Chartier, that sort of thing, by all means. But for a one-way NHL contract, I think that they've got to aim higher.
And Ross, we don't have him on this list because he's down in Belleville right now. We're looking at players up in the NHL, but I would choose Rourke Chartier over Boris Katchouk. If we're putting those two together, I think Rourke Chartier brings a better defensive game, and I think he would also be more susceptible to either signing a two-way deal or be a guy that knows he's going to be a fringe NHLer up and down the lineup. And Rourke Chartier is a great player in Belleville, so if you had to kind of, you got to start comparing guys and be like, okay, two of these guys have similar attributes, so you're going to choose. I think Boris Katchouk is probably the odd man out, unfortunately. And then you look at Cassidy's got another year on his deal as well, right? So
those are the four forwards in the Ottawa Senators. I shouldn't say organization, on the Sens roster. Again, NHLers only. Will do the AHL guys in due time after their playoff run. But those are the four forwards: Dominik Kubalik, Shane Pinto, Parker Kelly, and Boris Katchouk without contracts going forward. Kubalik, the only unrestricted free agent. We saved the best for last, at least the most polarizing. Erik Brannstrom is an RFA defenseman. On the other side, what to do with him, and NHL playoff talk, and two spins of the Tankathon wheel as we continue to await when will we finally get the date for the NHL draft lottery. So all that's on the other side. You're listening to Locked On Senators. It's your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could handpick the best stars for your business team? Well, Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one easy place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills. Why would you do that when you can do it all with Indeed? Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in a search. Sit back, relax. Indeed does the hard hiring work for you. Sponsor a job, and they'll match you with quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description right away when you post. With Indeed, you're hiring fast. Join over 3 million businesses worldwide using Indeed to hire great talent fast. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you got to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for quality applications that match your must-have job requirements. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
All right, Pilsy, we continue on with our free agent discussion. No, we'll get to those players who the Sens could target in free agency much closer to July 1st when the league calendar turns on Canada Day. Only 2 days after the NHL draft. It's going to be a very busy time in the hockey and the Senators world. But first, decide internally who's coming back with the $12.16 million in cap space that the Senators currently have to play with. So we've already talked about the forwards, your Shane Pintos, your Boris Katchouks, your Parker Kellys, and Dominik Kubalik. But I think most people are intrigued by Erik Brannstrom. No longer is the man in charge who drafted Mark Stone, but obviously traded him for Erik Brannstrom. You almost prefer the draft pick, but that's neither here nor there. Erik Brannstrom obviously comes over in the Mark Stone trade. He shepherded up through the lineup, has his highs and lows, but this was the best hockey I think we've seen Erik Brannstrom play. How do you handicap a guy who's come in, had a $2 million one-year contract, is an RFA, and is in a bit of a situation where he's in a surplus area in your team?
And Ross, he's an RFA with our Brights. That's important to be noted as well. Erik Brannstrom, career high in games played, 76. Career high in goals, 3, up from 2. Career high in assists, 17, up from 16. So a slight uptick from last year. Erik Brannstrom is no longer the divisive player he was in last year, the year
COVID
before.
year especially.
He was such a divisive prospect. I feel like you had half of Sens fans being like, you got to give him time. He's going to develop into a really good top 4 defenseman. And then you had the other half being like, too small, don't care. I feel like that's all it was. And unfortunately, I still think Erik Brannstrom is a solid NHL defenseman. Is he a top 4 defenseman in my mind? Probably not. Is he a bottom 4 defenseman in my mind? Sure. Maybe in small stretches.
Bottom 4 versus a top 4? You got a little turnover in there.
Well, but I don't want to say middle pair defenseman.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to place him.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting to, Ross. Yeah, for small sample sizes, I don't mind seeing him in a top 4 role. But for the most part, you want Erik Brannstrom to be your 5th or 6th best defenseman, really. And the thing is, you've got guys in Tyler Clevin, Max Gannett. You've got guys that will be ready to take on that challenge of being a bottom pair defenseman in the NHL. I think, Ross, you probably, and it sounds bad because you don't want to do this, but you probably just let this run to arbitration and sign whatever 1-year deal happens here. Because I think Erik Brannstrom can play on this team. It depends where the Sens go in the draft, where they go in free agency, trades, etc. If he's going to have a spot. But I was on the Erik Brannstrom is good, be patient side. And now I'm starting to be on time is running out. He might be too small. And a lot of NHL teams that are successful in the playoffs, the only small defensemen they have are their number 1 offensive contributing guys, like your Cale Makars, your Quinn Hughes, etc. Right? So I don't see Erik Brannstrom's future in Ottawa from a long-term lens.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see how this plays out. He could be a trade candidate as well this summer because there is value there, and that's a thing. You see it sometimes where he can be a solid.
But is there value?
I think you can get something for him. I would imagine.
What are you talking?
I have no idea. I wouldn't even know where to start.
I forget if it was last season or 2 seasons ago. The Athletic did an anonymous poll among league executives, and there were some quotes from executives being like, Sens fans that think Brandy's going to fetch a 2nd-round draft pick or something are losing it. He does not have that value around the league. And I think you get your rose-colored glasses on and you think about all the time and development you put into Brandy and the big return on the Mark Stone trade. So you start putting these expectations on him. But I think other GMs around the league, I don't know anyone's like no one's calling Steve Staios and is like, we got to get Erik Brannstrom. What's it going to take? You know, like I just feel like he's one of those guys. It's going to be a throw in on a deal, or it's like, hey, we'll take a flyer on him. I feel like that's where it's at now. And again, I don't mean to diminish the player because he's a good player. But I just, in the NHL, for teams that are aspiring to be in the playoffs, I'm starting to lose sight of where he fits in, unfortunately.
Because he's deployed like a defensive defenseman. He's third among D on penalty kill minutes per game. And that D pair with him and JBD just cannot move bodies in front of the net well enough and can't clear space well enough. They can't be out there together on the PK. But like Brandy's, he's an analytics darling. It just takes one analytics team to be like, oh, you got to give this guy a chance in our lineup. Every pair that he was on for an extended period of time this year had a positive expected goals, positive Corsi. The puck's always moving in the right direction. It's just when you get hemmed into your own zone, it can be tough at times because he's not built like a defensive defenseman, but that's where he's kind of been utilized with the Ottawa Senators. So it's going to be very interested. I just was so surprised last summer that was the first priority over Shane Pinto. That July 1st came, boom, Branny, JBD contracts right away. It was very strange to me. So let us know in the comments what should happen with Erik Brannstrom.
And just one final point. I really like the idea of a Cleven Branny bottom pair next season. I think that, like, you talked about JBD and Branny, so two young defensemen together, but I just think Cleven can provide the part of game that Branny is not able to provide due to his size. And then that can open Branny up to be a little bit more offensive and be the puck moving guy on that bottom pair. But then you're looking at it and you're like, okay, if Branny and Cleven are your bottom pair, then the rest of the decor is probably not changing that much. You're just fitting in one more right shot defenseman when you replace Chychrun or Shabbat. And then you're like, well, we're basically just running it back here. And this decor proved they are not good enough to be able to take the next step. So that's where you got to look and you're like, okay, how can we change things? And unfortunately, that might be an area where the Ottawa Senators look and be like, hey, kind of like the idea they had with Hamonic. Let's get a veteran right shot defenseman to play with Tyler Cleven. Like, that's the right idea. It wasn't exactly executed or wasn't the right player for it. But I think that might be a direction that Steve Staios decides to go instead of being like, let's put Cleven and Brandy together. Let's get a good veteran right shot defenseman that can help guide Cleven and help start developing him into the defenseman we think he can be. I mean, he looked pretty damn good in Belleville last night. I'll tell you that for free.
Whoever is on the Senators team next year will be playing under a new coach. The coaching search is underway, and Andy Strickland from the Cam and Strick podcast. Obviously, I think in the past, we've seen him post some things where it's like, okay, this is what you either want to happen. He's very St. Louis based, but he also has his sources, and they are saying, quote, hearing Ottawa has legitimate interest in Craig Berube, obviously former St. Louis Blues head coach. For me, he's number one on my power rankings in who I would like the Senators to hire. So that made me feel good to hear that there is interest from the Sens side. And I wonder if Berube, just as much as the teams, are saying, hey, I want to see which jobs are available when the whole marketplace is set.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a possibility, Ross. In Bruce Garriock's article, he talked about how Todd MacLellan said that he's looking for the right team and the right fit. So he's not going to be a guy that just takes a job to get a job. He's kind of got the cachet and the experience where he can do that. Now we know before Dave Poulin was hired by the Sens, when he was talking on TSN, he mentioned that he liked Berube a lot. And Ross, EP has this new feature, or at least it seems new to me, and it's called connections. If you scroll down on someone's EP page, they have connections. Craig Berube's connections, one of the top guys on his list, Dave Poulin. They played together from 1986 to 1995 on the Flyers and Capitals. So that would be
two spots.
So that would be a big reason why Dave Poulin is like, before he was with the Sens and probably now that he's with the Sens, is like, hey, I know Craig Berube very well. I'm willing to put kind of my stamp of approval on him. And what does it seem like the most valuable asset for NHL head coaches right now by teams talking that are looking for a head coach, players that don't have a head coach? Accountability. And guys like Craig Berube, guys like Dean Evason, guys like Todd MacLellan, they're looking at this and they're saying, we're old school hard-nosed coaches. You want accountability? I'll serve you up a good portion of accountability. And those are the types of guys I think the Ottawa Senators should be looking at. I'm with you, Ross. I think Berube would probably be my top choice as well, followed by Evason. And I don't know why. The idea of Todd MacLellan doesn't excite me that much. Maybe that's unfair by me, and mostly because he's been coaching out west, I guess. But the top two guys for me are Berube and Evason, I would say, for sure.
I don't know if I had just missed it, but it was updated half hour ago. This must be the article from Bruce Garriock that you're talking about.
Yep.
Lead is Ottawa Senators have taken the next step in their search for a new head coach. So I had just seen the tweet from Andy Strickland, and it sounds like Craig Berube, Dean Evason, and Todd MacLellan are the top candidates for the job, according to Bruce Garriock. So I find that very interesting. Garriock obviously read the article at the Ottawa Sun. They received permission to interview Wild head coach Dean Evason. Obviously, Evason's still under contract with the Wild, so you have to get permission, but the end of their salary comes off the books if he gets hired. So they always say yes to those. I've never heard someone kind of block someone else from getting a job after they've been fired.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. I know it has happened before, but look at Dean Evason's record with the Wild. That's something that I glossed over. I think it's like 147, 77, and 27. Did I get that right?
Playoff record's brutal though. They were first round outs every single year.
Ross, you know what's cool?
Getting to the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I'm not against Dean Evason. I think that would be a decent pickup. Like he wouldn't be my first choice, but definitely not last choice either. Yeah. In the playoffs, 8 wins in 23 games, but a great regular season points percentage of .639.
And Ross, you also got to you can't just look at that in a zoomed in screenshot. You got to look like the Minnesota Wild. That's a team that's strapped with $14.5 million in dead cap space. Like if you were able to give him 2 $7 million players on that Wild team, we're talking about a whole different story here. So I take that with a grain of salt. And as a team in the Ottawa Senators that hasn't even made the playoffs in 7 years, I'd be stoked to have 3 first-round exits, not going to lie. And then the thing with Todd MacLellan is he has a massive cap hit. Not cap hit, salary. I think Bruce was saying in the article, he's slated to make over $5 million US in his 2 years left or 1 year, but he has years left on that LA deal over $5 million. Now we know the old regime, the Ottawa Senators head coaching budget was among one of the lowest in the league. So I don't know if this new regime is going to be more willing to put that money forward, but I got to assume that's among the upper range of NHL coaches' salaries right now. So I don't know if that's something that's going to have Ottawa back away from that type of money with Todd MacLellan.
Accountability is the word that the Senators will use whenever they do end up hiring their next head coach. Really looking forward to this playing its way out, and the Senators landing on a guy who can not only bring accountability, obviously that's important, but I think have like an air about them. And I think that's where Berube and Evason would be solid guys. Like I watched Sheldon Keefe just after the game. He inspires zero confidence if I'm a fan of that team. So I'm hoping that a guy like Craig Berube comes in and just knows what the Ottawa Senators can be and starts dealing with it from that standpoint.
And Ross, all you have to do is look at the backlash from St. Louis Blues fans when he was fired. They were pissed.
Except for Jordan Kyrou.
I think the Kyrou thing was overblown. I didn't jump on that like everybody else did. Didn't all he say was, yeah, we're moving forward to the new guy now or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, the tone implied that he wasn't super sad that he's gone. But hey, it's the way it goes.
Yeah. Do you have to be sad about it? I don't know. I don't think that. Like, what the other spectrum, Ross, is look at the Ottawa Senators. Tim Stützle and Brady Katchouk were pouting and sad about DJ Smith getting fired. That didn't work out great either, right? So
No.
I just think that, yeah, I wasn't jumping on Kyrou for that. And you can really tell a coach by what the fans think, or at least what kind of attitude he gives off based on what the fans think. And they were pissed that he was let go. So I look at that as something.
I like how you look at it more from the fans than one of the players in the room. You're like, no, the fans liked him. No, a lot of players liked him too.
And look, young players probably too. You're not always going to like a guy that holds you accountable and is a hard ass. And, it's not always fun to go to the rink when you're a young player used to scoring goals and you've got millions in the bank and this guy is barking at you every single day. Like, you might not always like that. Good. Like this, we got to move on from being a hockey club to being a hockey team, because it just seemed like for too long it was okay to lose and everyone's feelings were sheltered and all these young players, yada, yada, yada. Well, I don't mind if the players don't love the coach that much, honestly.
More of that conversation in the days to come here on Locked On Senators. A 2-spin for the people after missing out yesterday. So far, we're 2 days into our daily end of show spin for the Ottawa Senators draft lottery odds, and we are still waiting for the draft lottery date to be officially set. Pilsy, are we going to swing around twice, or are you going to go 2 picks, 2 picks, 2 picks?
I was thinking about this, Ross. I think we got to swing around twice.
Okay, sounds good. So we will go with you first, then me, then the Citizens.
Yes.
Okay, your pick here. Anaheim up 2 spots. Ottawa stays in 7th place. So you've got 7. If this is 8 again, I'm going to start questioning the validity of this. Ottawa up. I got him up.
Okay, there we go.
Ottawa up to number 2. Okay, now for the Citizen spin, I've got to reset it because we don't want any shenanigans there. And the Senators down to number 8. So the Citizens down to number 8. The Citizens again up to number 2. But Montreal,
the Citizens have been good.
The Citizens have been good. That's 3 number 2s and 1 number 8 for the Citizens so far. I'm trying to stay hot though, because I just had number 2. How would you feel about this though? Montreal wins the lottery, Sens win too.
Makes me a little nervous, Ross, but I could see a situation where the Habs draft Celebrini and first thing they're like, he's going to be a winger. He's a winger. Don't let him play center. Only have him play the wing.
Hilarious. Okay, here we go. So Ottawa down 1 spot, Arizona first, Utah first.
You know what? I'm actually down for that. Give Utah, MacLellan, Celebrini, get things going. I don't hate that.
I'm not down from it from the standpoint of New Jersey. They've won the lottery enough.
Dude, imagine they added Lev Shunov to their decor. Holy Nemec, Hughes, Lev Shunov. Whoo, and then Dougie Hamilton. That'd be tough.
Okay, they still don't have a goalie, but neither do the Sens. Okay, final one here from you. Staying steady at 7, Pilsy.
Okay,
I've
only had 7s.
You've only had 7s.
Lucky number 7s. Let's go.
So we are 4 spins in here so far, and we have 0 first overalls through 10 spins total. Pilsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Final thoughts for me is the Belleville Senators are buzzing. If you guys are kind of casual fans and haven't been following along with Belleville or just haven't dived into that too much, now's the time. Playoff hockey is here. They're playing really well. They've got arguably the deepest roster we've seen since you and I worked there, Ross, way back in the day. So get into Belleville, baby. If you guys are in the GTA area, go to Coca-Cola Coliseum. Let them hear you.
That's Brandon Piller. I'm Ross Levitan. Thanks so much for listening to another edition. This has been the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day.